Welcome to another object lesson. This week I'm going to talk about the summer of 1973 and what was hanging around in the air at that time. And the reason I'm doing this is because of the release of a new graphic novel that will be upcoming hopefully within the next few months called Collegeville by Clyde Copernic. I've been supporting it on Patreon since pretty much the beginning, I think, because it's just an amazing furry graphic novel. It's a sort of middle American Gothic story. But what really drew me in was the style and the use of misregistered printing and all of these other things that just give it a feel that I haven't seen in a lot of furry art before. If you want to check it out, just do a search for Collegeville online, or perhaps I'll show the URL here. But let's get down to the objects that were in the air in the summer of 1973. And the best place to start with that is with this comic book. This is part of a big series of romance comics that were aimed at girls, and they all came, or mostly came, from Charlton Comics. That was the big player in the scene then. And they were very cheaply produced, so they have that kind of feel of misregistration and cheap paper, but just look at the, but the feeling on them, of course we have a little bit of cheesecake there for some reason, not quite sure why that's in a, well, we can suppose why that's in a comic book aimed at girls, but, lots of things for beauty and, telling girls they're ugly and such, but anyway, yeah, just really fascinating things, and they have these ads for selling seed packets or whatever. This particular one is so that you could win a bike and that kind of thing. Yeah, crash diet, speed pills probably, but anyway, a message for daddies, oh my God. Anyway, you can spend all day looking at that. The funny thing about those romance comics is a writer named John Lustig bought the rights to one called First Kiss, and he reused the artwork for this series that he called Last Kiss, and he just basically put new writing on top of it, and it's hilarious. For example, honey, I'm not angry. Really, I'm not, but please, next time you bury me in the sand, don't put me in a casket. All my other boyfriends all my other husbands let me do that. And the whole thing is just, wonderful like that. John Lustig has had ambulance. No, he hasn't had an ambulance. He's had a successful career as a writer, I believe, of movies and TV, among other things. The next item, speaking of comics, is Doonesbury, and I don't think people today recognize exactly how important Doonesbury was to the zeitgeist of 1972, 1973. It was a comic strip that was created by Gary Trudeau when he was in college at Yale between 1968 and 1970, and then he was immediately signed for syndication because it was very popular and very well done. And it became a major venue for political criticism throughout the 70s and 80s, and I believe the comic strip is still going today. So let's take a quick look. This is a boxed set of books, and at least one of them is from 1972 or 1973. We could probably figure that out by looking at the style. Yeah, you can see this is an earlier style. If you know Doonesbury, this will seem quite, rough to you. But as I say, it's a remarkable series, and it's remarkable he's still going, and it's engendered a lot of controversy over the years. And speaking of political writing, we have Ms. Magazine, which was started at around the same time. It first came out in 1971. Led by Gloria Steinem, who is an amazing writer, and I think very often her skill as a writer is overlooked because her subject was feminism, which was more often considered for its political content, rightly so, but however that overshadowed the quality of her writing. A book of hers was very important to me in college called Outrageous Acts and Everyday Rebellions. And Ms. Magazine was one of the things that we had on our living room table the whole time I was growing up. I think what's important about it is not only was it a feminist magazine, because there were lots of feminist publications at the time, that going back into the 60s, but it was the first one that was treated like a professional magazine. You know, they had professional ad sales landing national contracts with places like Polaroid. At some point, they decided not to take cigarette advertising, I believe. And something else interesting about it is, I don't know if I can find this quickly, but they have a section called No Comment, where they openly critique, I can't find it quickly, but they critique some of the ads that are in the publications of the day. Oh, here it is. You know, like for example, here's an ad, you know, telling girls that you can be somebody, doctors, lawyers, you can be their secretary. Very important to call out, you know, such wrongs of the day in a very, I think, effective way, because it's not screaming about it, it's just saying, look at this, consider this. Also on our living room table was Consumer Reports. This is, again, important because it reviewed items available for consumers of the time, such as calculators, which were very new at the time. And it did it in a way that was impartial. And one of the reasons they were able to do that is because it was a nonprofit that didn't accept any advertising. So it wasn't that Remington could buy an ad and then get a better review, which is common even today in some magazines. The other reason I like things like this is because it shows the level of technology and what was important to people, and also the pricing. And speaking of that, let's move on to what I think is the most colorful and time-consuming thing if you want to spend an evening just living in 1973 by going through documents. And this is a catalog, a consumer catalog, primarily for jewelry, but also for tableware and electronics, much like the Sears Roebuck catalog. And of course, the styling is astonishing, and the range of things being offered, which aren't really offered today in the same way. But something that really fascinates me is the prices, because the prices for consumer goods were very high. I mean, like, let's take a look at this fairly simple camera, $135. I'll just zoom in on that. You know, first of all, a camera like this would be less than $135 today, an equivalent camera. Secondly, remember, people were only making, I don't know the exact number, but something like $1 or $2 a day. So this was, you know, a major purchase. And that's true for all of these things, you know, luggage, $65 luggage. But also remember, these things were produced by and large in the United States. So we weren't taking advantage of cheap labor overseas, but on the other hand, we had jobs. Of course, that changed during the 70s and 80s as economics changed. Finally, here's something that probably many of you recognize, Life magazine. This is the annual review issue. It's also, interestingly, the last one that was ever published. And once again, the ads are interesting, as well as what people found, you know, people wanted to read about. Vietnam War was happening, of course. And by the way, a lot of wars were happening in 1972, 1973. Ireland, Northern Ireland was having what was basically a war. The Vietnam War, Cambodia, I don't even know all of them. I did a very quick read up, and there were so many I can't remember, but there were a lot of wars going on back then. I did want to call out one thing in here, because when I look at these, I like to see, oh, what intersection did I have with anything that was in here? Well, for one thing, let's see. That's a different thing. But I was only 5 years old, so of course I didn't have a lot of intersection with, you know, with adult life. But sort of tangentially do with this listing. It talks about Marjo Gortner, who was the subject of a documentary called Marjo, M-A-R-J-O-E. He was a child preacher, and in the documentary he talks about how it's basically a big scam, you know, how he's doing it for show business more than religion, and you know, he's very talented, and he actually does bring in the believers and bring in the money. What's interesting about this is that the documentary won the Academy Award. in 1972, I guess it was. And the documentary maker was Sarah Kernochin. She later made another documentary. She didn't make a lot of movies, but she did make another documentary, a short one called Thoth, in I think 2002, which again won the Short Documentary Academy Award. The subject of that documentary is somebody I've known for a long time and actually produced a few shows, a musician who at the time I met him was living in San Francisco. So anyway, it's kind of funny to have that through line into the past. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed your dip back into the summer of 1973, and do check out Collegeville. It's, I think, already important, and perhaps we'll get the traction to make it even more important in the public eye.